Welcome everyone to the Bishop Gallery. Welcome to the Artist Talk for our current exhibition, The 12th Street Experiment, photography of Jean-Michel Basquiat, presented by photographer, collector, embryologist, just great person, Miss Alexis Adler. We have the privilege and time to speak to today. So, being that we have this documentary here, the short, if you will, vignette, a lot of stuff that I usually have to focus on during the artist talks, I'm gonna just dive right in because, we kind of got the basics out the way. So just, I guess what everybody wants to know, or probably everybody's wondering, okay, what made a scientist pick up a camera? And what made you in 1979, 1980 decide this was important enough to be filming in the first place?
Well, I had met Jean, and he had already been writing on the walls with ideas on the streets of Lower Manhattan where we lived. And
that was Samo.
That was Samo. And we met at a party in early 79, and then by the middle of 79, we ended up staying at the same house at Felice Rosser's, also a fellow Barnard grad, as Monica here. And we then ended up staying, getting kicked out of Felice's because Jean was not he was not the easiest roommate. I mean, even at the time, we were pretty casual, I would say. That's an understatement. It was still, he was a difficult roommate. So we ended up moving to 12th Street together to a homestead, actually. It was semi-abandoned at the time. And we moved in, and Sean began creating art. It just, whatever he could find from the street, he would bring up, and it would be incorporated into the art world.
In 12th Street between, for those of us who
So it's 12th Street between Avenue A and B in the East Village.
Hence the name of the show, right? The 12th Street Experiment.
Yes, and I still live there today, and that was an advantage. I was able to keep all these negatives and all the images together because we did end up buying the apartment. For anybody who's done an HDFC, it's $250. We bought our apartment, and I was able to, years after Jean had moved out, I was able to buy the apartment next door and consolidate the two apartments and raise up two kids. And now I'm sort of raising up this whole art collection and images.
So, because those images that we were taking in the vignette, those cool images, that's the apartment now. It wasn't quite that big when you guys lived in it.
Right, it's just half, and it, of course, doesn't look like that.
So the collection is broken up into, I would say, 3 categories, right? We have those performance art sessions that you mentioned, right? Where Jean is both the muse and the canvas, right? Then you have pictures, what I think are extremely historically relevant, but pictures of the actual artwork, many of the pieces that don't exist or people don't know whatever happened to them, correct? So the only place that they exist is in your collection. And then of course, you guys being, boyfriend and girlfriend, you have some candids of your boyfriend just in the apartment, which I think you've caught some magical moments there as well, even though they weren't as planned. So just knowing those kind of 3 categories, if we could just talk about, one, why did you think this was important to actually capture his artwork at the time? Like, it was 1979, 1980. He wasn't, the Basquiat, right? No. He was Jean, right?
And people had grandiose, as young people often do. He said to people, I'm going to be a great artist. I'm going to be a famous artist, he told people. And everybody say, oh, sure, Jean. But I really, felt that he had something special. And so I felt it was important to document because I felt it was special.
So tell me, what were making your spider senses go off, so to speak? What made you feel like, no, there's something special about this?
Well, first of all, as a person, Jean was a very deep person. Okay. So, philosophically. He was always thinking. He was always doing his art. I mean, it was always present, and that was definitely,
that was part of it.
Yeah.
What about the artwork itself? Like anything particular? Like some of these sculptures that you have in your collection, I have never seen work of Jean-Michel Basquiat's that look like some of these sculptures.
Yes.
It almost reminds me of like a Robert Rauschenberg or something. Like it's like a different side of him that we didn't know existed.
Well, he was studying art at the time.
Okay.
I mean, really, he was. I had a history of art. We all had to take history of art at Barnard, and he was studying that. I had a book of Picasso prints. He was. This is before the internet, guys. So we didn't have access to everything like at the drop of our hats. So I had a few art books, and he was just, studying those, my science, my biology, my chemistry, and biochem books. He was studying those, and you could see him drawing graphs and charts. And he was just, he was definitely bringing it all together, ready to hatch to another place.
But
I didn't know. I mean,
But you had a hunch.
Yeah.
You clicked. And in addition to the photos, you also kept about 40 pieces of his actual artwork, correct?
Yes. So I have drawings, writings. I have an artist notebook and clothing that he would paint and sell on the street. So that's in a traveling exhibit that's now in Holland. And it's been really interesting to see, this work has never been shown, and it was just, I brought it out about 6 years ago, and so it's now just being shown for the first time.
And what's the reaction?
People are really excited. I mean, since I brought it out, which was sort of like the end of 2012, 2013, people have really been excited because Jean died when he was 27. And so his career, though he was very prolific, he passed away so young. So this work, it represents 6 months of his life, his life at the time, only exists right here. And it was just at that moment when he was ready to emerge, and Anina Nose picked him up, and he began his gallery
career.
Right.
So just rewinding, I didn't want to cut you off in the middle of the statement, but you said something really interesting. You said he would look at your textbooks.
Yes.
And that would, he would use things in your textbooks in his artwork.
Yes, definitely.
So talk to us more about that.
Well, I took the basic science curriculum at Barnard, and he just was everything that Sean could get his hands on. He was studying, and that was just part of what he was. The imagery, and his imagery is so complex. When you look at his drawings and paintings, they're multi-layered, and he's continuously expressing thoughts, on various layers, levels.
So when you see those lines in the painting with the circles, and it looks like a water molecule, it actually might be one?
It might be.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And not getting too much into your time with John, because I know you spent a lot of time in the dark room developing these photos. You were a photographer long before you met him. And so want to just kind of get into what inspired you to...
I bought the camera. I mean, I had cameras before that, small Instamatics, but I really bought the camera because of Jean.
Okay.
Because here, this whole thing was, it was going on around me, and I really felt it was important to document.
So when you say this whole thing, I'm getting bits and pieces, but I don't know if you guys are feeling it, but I feel like she's holding back a little bit from us. And so when you describe the scene for us, what's the backdrop? It's 1979, 1980, you're on 12th Street, East Village. What is the life like?
Well, we went out a lot, probably every night. Yeah. And we went to hear music, and we'd hear a band, and then we'd go out to a club, and we'd go out to the next an after hours club, and that's what we did. And then maybe we'd get some coffee afterwards, and maybe we'd get some sleep. I would go to sleep and then go up, get to my job in the morning somehow. And Jean just kept on working. So he'd come home and he'd just start working, and he'd work he'd just work all through the day, and then he'd buy up paint and sweatshirts and sell them on the street, and Color Xerox was really big. It had just come out. He was making those postcards and selling them on the street.
Well, which postcards are you referring to?
So he was making these postcards with a woman named Jennifer Stein, and they were Color Xeroxes, and he sold them on the street, and that was how he met Andy Warhol. He had always wanted to meet Andy Warhol. He was selling these cards. He saw him in a restaurant, walked in and sold them 2 postcards. And he came home. He was so excited.
Oh, he was living with you at the time.
He was so excited.
And just kind of
Andy Warhol was
gears.
It was an idol. Yeah.
So just kind of changing gears a little bit. What was it like for you as a photographer in the dark room, actually developing these works? Some of them are, very refined, beautiful pictures. Some of them are a little, darker, have a little shading to them, or, has almost like an artistic feel of their own. Is that purposeful? Is that just you kind of growing as a photographer and making mistakes?
Well,
what's that about?
Okay. We're in the digital age. This is pre-digital. You didn't have the ability to see what the image was going to look like. And I'm just experimenting myself. And so some of these images are somewhat out of focus, or, I'm just working on my craft here. And also the dark room, for anybody who's done darkroom, it's a very exciting process. And, you're sitting with the trays, it's dark, with the red light, and the image comes out. It's like magic. If you're into it, it's like very cool. Anyway,
if you're into that sort of thing.
like chemical reactions, they appeal to me somehow. Anyway, so, but again, this is pre-digital, so we didn't have a chance to, I don't like that image, I'll just do it again. It's just, you just didn't do that,
But you kept the negatives.
Yes. So the negatives, and some of them I didn't develop perfectly, and there's the touch, and, I messed up the image. But anyway, it was during the processing.
That's part of the authenticity of it too, I think, right? Every artist I've probably ever met wouldn't, every piece of art they've created, they probably wouldn't sell.
Right.
Even though we like to pretend like everything they've ever done was genius, right? So what are some of so aside from this wonderful collection, what are some of the other bodies of work? We'll get, minus the embryos, we'll get into that, but some of the other bodies of work that you've done back in 1979, 1980.
So back then I was taking photographs of bands. Okay. So I have a lot of band images, and
what kind of bands?
Downtown bands, like the Dead Kennedys. They're from San Francisco, but ESG, and this was a very dynamic time music-wise, because music was all just coming together downtown and just being mixed up, and we had. All of a sudden, we had, punk rock mixing with hip hop, mixing with reggae and Latin and world music, and it was all coming together. And so it was a very dynamic time. And so.
And so, what were you going to like club to club? Were you just going to these like private performances? Where are some of the spots you used to capture the bands at?
There was, Peppermint Lounge, or Mud Club, Danceteria. Tier 3.
I was gonna say we can yell about the crowd.
Yeah, those are the clubs we go.
I talked to Hillary
regularly.
Yeager the other day.
Yes, Hillary.
Tier-
And Club 57 was around the corner.
And these were just the normal hangout.
Yes.
And so this is where everyone
Day to day.
was.
The
What-
Palladium later on.
Lay it out for me. We're in tier 3. What was the atmosphere like? Who was there?
Tier 3 was, well, the Bud Club and Tier 3 were a couple blocks apart.
Okay, so let's talk about both of them.
So they both had different venues and had different, often had different live components. So there would be a band, or there'd be a film, or there'd be a performance. And so you'd go back and forth depending on, what was going on.
And who was there? What were the people like?
So the people were like this downtown sort of clique. I don't know. It wasn't really like a clique, but it was just like people from a scene that we just, Keith Haring. I mean, people were just there, and we were just
What
doing
were there?
art.
Any people we would know? Or any industries? Or
Well, it was,
I'm going to start just pulling it out of you directly. I know it's weird. You have some of these great stories, but like what were, I guess, for those of us on the outsiders, right? Just thinking about, I'm trying to think of the juicy stuff that the outsiders want to know, right? So as an outsider, right, who's only heard about this stuff in stories, what do you think is, I guess, the hallmark, or like kind of the signature feeling of that scene? Like, how would you describe them from that point? Because I do think we kind of hear about this era, like this magical time in the 70s and Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, the Bud Club, I think, was sort of personified it in a really good way. And I mean, in Tier 3, they all did, but the Mud Club was pretty special.
Okay.
But they were all these clubs where, you could be an area, or, and have a really amazing experience, or Palladium. I saw, Jean and I went to see James Brown at Irving Plaza.
Nice.
A really amazing show.
Okay.
Can I just say? We really...
And so, I guess separate and apart from the scene, the fun part, right? It was kind of a rough scene too, right? Yes. It wasn't all sweet parties. Tell us about that part of it. How did that influence you as a person? How do you think it influenced John? Just growing up in the era where, from what I was told about my parents, right? It was, half of Lower Manhattan was burnt out in the 60s and 70s. Right. There wasn't even vacancy. It wasn't windows there. So what was it like actually living there and kind of being part of the culture that, like, changed that neighborhood?
I was just earlier working in my community garden, and somebody from another part of the country or the world was asking me just how come we have community gardens? And it was because when we moved to the East Village and the Lower East Side was just being burnt down. It was the landlords couldn't collect enough rent to pay the taxes, so they were abandoning the buildings. The buildings were being taken over by whoever, and if there were drugs, people were shooting galleries. There were the
What's
fires.
a shooting gallery for those who don't know?
So a place where people injected drugs.
Got it. Shot up heroin.
Heroin, yes,
Gotcha.
in particular. And so there was a lot of that. The playground across the street from our house was a homeless encampment. And there were some activists in the neighborhood. There were always activists. And some started a community garden across the street. And now we have a beautiful community garden where it was just, when we first moved there, it was just rubble. And wherever in the neighborhood was either a decomposing building or one that had just fallen down, or it was dangerous because it was basically lawless.
Why did you want to live there?
Well, the rents were cheap, and it was very cool. And so a few friends started moving downtown and said, "Oh, it's." I mean, I was living in Washington at Columbia,
Okay.
and it was none too safe up there either. No part of the city was really like you couldn't really walk down the street and just la-di-da. You're always like, okay, I've got to know what's going on at all times, and there could be a gunfight on the block when you came home, and so you'd have to duck in, like
I gotta wait till they stop shooting.
Yes.
And then I'll go.
And that happened.
I mean, I'm from the Side.
Yes, yeah.
I understand.
Right.
What year was this now?
This is 79, 80. And there was gun, that people got shot, and there were things that happened. My neighbor got shot. These things happened.
Yeah. And did you have a personal experience? And maybe I'm getting this wrong, but did someone ever try to take your camera?
Well, that was one thing. I rarely took my camera out onto the street because it was just ridiculous. You would never even think of taking a camera out, even broad daylight on the street. I mean, you guys, it's hard to imagine. I mean, even Union Square, you would never cross through that park in the daylight, let alone night.
Wow. It's a hang on.
Or the park near
Washington.
all the parks.
All of the above.
The library park, Bryant Park.
Yeah.
No, you would never go through it.
You mean with the Cialis and outdoor skating rink and everything?
Yes. No, it was dangerous. And so it just was.
But you guys somehow the cool factor overwhelmed
so I
the
never took
danger.
my camera out, but eventually, like within a couple of years, it was stolen from in my apartment.
That's not funny.
And
That's
break-ins happened. It just was like that.
But the energy and the creativity seem to kind of override or be great enough where all of that stuff could be endured.
Yeah, I mean, because none of us had a whole lot. So there was, my camera was stolen, but I didn't, I had a stereo, and speakers. That was about it for precious belongings, And we didn't have, the jobs didn't pay all that much, but rent was cheap. We had rent, Con Ed, and phone, and that's it. That's all the bills we had, and it didn't take that much to keep us going.
So
Yeah, and then going out, of course. And drugs.
you must go.
Our $5 bags of marijuana after work.
Yeah, oh God, that's too funny. You made me lose my train of thought. And so I guess bring it forward, right? Well, let's ease into the photography. I don't want to skip a step for those people who don't know you and are not personal friends here. You have Felice, who's a singer, live musician, John, who's a painter, multidisciplinary artist, and the embryologist. How did that work? How was being the scientist in the group? What was that?
My friends were all artists at the time, and here, except for Monica, though our lives were apart because science and art were kind of separate. Mm-hmm. But I loved my artist friends. So like Luke Sant, we went to college together, and Jim Jarmusch. Mm-hmm. I met them all at school.
And they were into the arts, and you were...
Yeah, and I was into science, and that just was the way it was.
Did you ever find it was your relationships were conflicting, or did you find these the creatives are driving me crazy, or was there ever any tension because... No, it was you kind of fit right in.
Yeah.
I don't think people... Well, what about the embryologists? Did you fit in with them?
The embryologist, well, one of my embryologist friends is back here.
Oh,
And so, yes.
representing.
Yes. And, well, embryology is an amazing field, but because we're right there at the start of life.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of my mentors have been very much artistic type scientists, and they were sort of spurred me on.
Okay. Had a little encouragement.
Yes. Well, in the art, they were in their own way artists.
So transitioning, you have actually turned your actual science into your art, right? In some ways. Can you explain to us what that's about without me giving away any spoilers?
Okay, so I've been storing up images of embryos over the years, and now have quite a file, and I've been starting to print and show those.
And when you say embryos, for this layman's who don't know any better,
Okay.
what are you actually taking a picture of?
So,
Like,
an embryologist is a person who does in vitro fertilization. So, we mix eggs and sperm together in a petri dish and watch the beginning of life form and watch the development of these embryos and test them and work with them and hopefully, freeze, thaw them. We're the early babysitters, and we're keeping track, very important, of our specimens at all times.
And when people, you're literally helping. I think Michelle Obama just wrote about this in her book.
Yes.
She got in vitro fertilization. So you're literally helping families around the world.
Yes.
You've traveled to Asia.
Yes, I've been around the world
to teach people.
Yes.
So you're an accomplished embryologist.
Yes.
Now, I think people should understand, this is not like a part-time in the lab thing. You're very accomplished. So you have a whole separate career that you decided you're going to step away from and focus fully on your art full time.
Right. I spent 30 years in the embryology lab and really ran a lab for 20 years at NYU.
Wow.
And 19 years, but and it was just time for me to move on to do something else. And so I've helped do a startup, or two, or three.
Okay.
And but now I'm sharing my knowledge in a different way.
It's super cool that you're able to combine your experience and knowledge as a scientist. And many people would say you're like your day job, but it's clearly bigger than that for you.
Yeah.
But with your passion and your not your hobby, your full time now, but your photography, how does that create unique opportunities for you to do what you love, which is educate, right? You love to teach people. You're always telling me about teaching people. So how does the art help you with that?
That's a good question. And I think it's another expression, and I think it's a way in which people can express themselves in a different way. And I think it's been, for me, really important to be able to do that, along with, like you said, the day job.
Awesome. Well, before we open it up for the floor for questions, I do want to kind of zip back to the collection. We have these beautiful pictures behind us. And just wanted you to kind of go down the line and give us an idea of what was going on in the apartment at the time. And if we could start off with the glasses to the far left.
Okay, so in this series, shot a box of silly putty, which is this sort of special substance, I don't know, like a kid's toy type substance. And these glasses, he found broken glasses on the street, and he said, okay, I'm going to set this up, and we're going to, and we worked it out, and we're going to photograph this series. And so that's one of the images from that series. This image here is probably from 1981. Jean had moved out of the apartment on 12th Street about mid-1980, but he would come back and stay. We each had different boyfriends, girlfriends. He'd moved on, I'd moved on, but occasionally he'd come back and stay. it was like that. It was the time before AIDS. It was a very different type of time, I would say.
Free.
Yeah, it was just different. This haircut that he gave himself, he said he was coming and going at the same time. So, that was like an imagery that you can see him showing off. And here, I had put this record up on the wall, and he was like, "No, you shouldn't put the record up on the wall. We should put a book up on the wall." So Naked Lunch became part of the scenery here. And here, this is from that same time period, and he's sort of showing off how long his hair had gotten. My hair's getting long. And there in this colored image, it's we each had our own bedroom. We shared beds, but anyway, that was back in his room. And then this series of the refrigerator, the TV in the refrigerator, again, we set it up and
How did he get the TV in the refrigerator?
Well, okay.
On.
Well, it's just, everything was smaller too. No huge screens. This is like a small black and white set that my cousin had given me, There were like, 3-4 channels, and then the UHF, there was that other channels, And, it was just, and it was the kind with the freezer, it wasn't self-defrosting. So back in the day, what happened was the freezer would absorb all the moisture and become a big block of ice. And then you couldn't, it would become bigger and bigger, and then you couldn't close the fridge. And then you had to do something. So you take a knife and chip away, and if you had a hair dryer, maybe you'd blow on it. But it was just these, this is one of those. And so, and you'd be accusing, I remember at Barnard when we'd have these refrigerators and we'd have to deal with this thing, and the same with this one, oh no, the refrigerator's not closing. We've got to deal with it. Anyway. And this TV set is not the same TV set. No, it was a broken one that he found on the street and brought up, and it became a piece of art. And again, this is from the series with the silly putty. Mm-hmm. And there's Sean at work on the floor.
He's actually creating the piece right here, right? And he's painting on that floor.
He's painting on the floor, but he could be working on something else at the moment. It doesn't look like he's painting the floor. The floor looks painted, but he's just working on something.
Gotcha.
And we didn't have chairs. We didn't have any furniture. Everything we had, we found on the street, including the silverware. That's just how it was. We just didn't have, it was normal. There was a lot of stuff that was on the street, a lot of furniture, a lot of, stuff. We didn't have a lot of money. It was normal. And so we just found everything on the street. And we also didn't seem to need that much as today. I don't know if that makes sense, but we just didn't. And so you could see the apartment. There's the floor of the apartment, and then the apartment itself. It was just, we had records and.
Can you talk about that door?
Okay, so, and then there's the suitcase, which is, he'd find these suitcases and on the street and stuff, and it would become an installation. Now that door was painted later. That was painted at the same time, around 1981. It says famous Negro athletes, and the icons are something that are very much prominent throughout his career.
And
the
can
images.
you just explain some of those icons for those of us who are not as...
Basquiat. Okay, so the crown on the left is his iconic crown, and he did that heart and cross, which is I think a Catholic thing, or I'm not sure, but it's a. And the car and the wheel with the spokes.
Those are all iconic imagery.
All
what about
images.
the famous Negro athletes? Because that shows up in other works
Yes.
as well. So do you have any insight into like why he wrote that or what?
No.
Okay. See, that's what I like. You're honest.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make up stuff.
And we won't go through the entire selection. I did see people look like they were a little anxious in their eyes, so I do want to turn over the floor for questions, unless you want to.
No.
You know.
That's good.
So, right, if you just introduce yourself to us when you ask your question.
All right. My name is Ben, and I'm Alexis's friend. Actually, fiance. Full disclosure. I have several questions, but let me ask: any of these pictures before you got the good camera that you bought?
No. These are from this camera.
Mm.
There was no other camera.
Yes.
Two things.
Well, and can you introduce yourself?
Okay,
Because
my name is Andrea. I met Alexis when I was walking down the street one day wearing an English beat t-shirt. And she's like, oh, my friend's married to the guitarist. And we've been friends ever since. That was about 1980, 79, 80. But my point is that Alexis, you sort of kept on questioning, well, you're an embryologist. How do you know all these artists? Alexis has always been on the pulse of everything. I mean, you introduced me to Fela. We listened to Bowie. You just always, that's just Alexis, just because her career was embryology. You've always been on the pulse of music, art. So that's the one thing. So that explains, you just always zoom, and that's probably why you documented John, because you didn't know he was going to blow up, but it was fascinating. He was fascinating, and Alexis loves art, so that's why she did it, I think. Second thing is, I want you to tell the story about the olive oil on the wall and taking it out of the wall. I think that's fascinating.
Okay, so one of the first things that John did when we moved in is he painted this mural on the wall, and it said olive oil on the. He was really into cartoons and Popeye, and so he painted this mural, and I was like, okay. I mean, this right away, but it was like right on the wall. I don't know why I didn't think maybe I should get some canvases. So I don't know
help them out, right? So what happened to it?
So it was on the wall for 35 years. I protected it. It was really hard work. I mean, after 35 years, you want to paint, I had painted the room, but, around this image, and it was just, I was protecting. I had 2 kids, they had multiple friends. There was always people around the apartment. So I had to protect this. And then in back of it was a bathroom, and there was a door that opened up to basically this mural. So I had this sort of stack of like blankets and stuff in this basket that was just there as a protection.
To make sure it didn't hit
that it didn't hit. So for 35 years I did that. And then at this moment in this whole project, I had a mural cut out of the wall. Well, actually, the whole wall came out, and with an art conservator, and I ended up selling that and the door at a Christie's auction in 2014.
But what I thought was interesting is that they weren't even sure if they could cut it out. You said it could dissolve to dust because it was literally on
the plaster, right?
On the plaster. So that's the
plaster.
part I thought was.
So it was on an old plaster wall, not sheetrock.
Yeah.
Old plaster. So the way they made plaster was plaster, and there was metal lathe, and there was horsehair, and all kinds of stuff that was incorporated, and wood, these wood lats. And so But luckily it was on the other side of the wall is a bathroom. So we were actually able to cut surgically this whole section of the wall out. And then it was framed and stabilized and conserved and all the stuff that they do. And I ended up selling it. It was very beautiful at the
I'm
end.
sure Christie's got a good penny out of that too.
Yeah.
That's Any next question? Any other questions? Good, because I have some questions.
Did John ever paint on a canvas in the apartment?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe there was some canvas board, and I believe up in the front there is one canvas board that he painted, and then it left. I don't know what happened to it.
That's
So
one of his
things
like earliest paintings,
right,
right?
and things came and went in the apartment. It was his stuff, you know, and whatever. And yeah, so the works did come and go. And I know that Patricia Field had a show of his work, and I think some of these
work.
items did get there.
And they got lost when the famous Patricia Field
Yes.
debacle and all the
Yeah.
work got thrown away at her.
Yes. Unfortunately.
Well, here and then.
So, hi, my name's Lee. What were John's opinions of himself as an artist at the time where he was creating these artworks? And how did he feel about himself as an artist and his future? Did he have any concept that he would become who he is now?
Yes, he definitely said, I'm going to be a famous artist. And his friends were like, yeah, sure, John. And I was like, I knew he was destined for, you know, like he was just an amazing thinker and concept and deep. And I you know, had this sense that this was going to blow up and it was going to be amazing. But I didn't really know how amazing. But he definitely had the sense himself of that, for sure.
It's funny you asked that. One of your other friends, Al Diaz, talks about him and Jean hanging out in the village one day, and it's like daybreak, right? The sun's coming up, and they're walking around, and they're like finding joints on the floor, and they're randomly picking them up and smoking them, and they're like hanging out, and he says Jean just turns to him, and like totally unsolicited, like out of the blue, and it's like, Al, I'm gonna be a famous artist, but I'm gonna die young. And like just kind of gets back into whatever they were doing before he makes the statement. And so it seems from all of you, the consensus was he believed in himself way more than any of us ever could, and clearly for rightful reasons, right? And hello, could you introduce yourself as well?
Dr. Alfred Richmond. I'm a professor of history and education at the University of Bridgeport. But the most impressive part of my resume is that I was the high school history teacher at Stevenson's alma mater.
Yes, it was my high school history.
So proud of you. So that's my little auntie bit. On to the question.
Yes,
Basquiat was in New York at a time where there's like this cultural explosion, particularly in the area of hip hop. And art and music always coincide. So my question is, A, did he listen to hip hop? And B, if you could name check one or two songs, even groups that he kind of liked and was digging at that time?
Sure. Okay, so it was a very dynamic time. I mean, music and art, and it was very fluid as well. So you could say you're an artist, but you could be a painter and a musician as well, you know, and be, you know, involved in video which was just emerging, or film. And people were, it was very fluid. You could move between different genres. And music was just coming together. And so, yeah, Jean would listen to, and we would listen to like Kraftwerk, or David Bowie, and hip hop, Grandmaster Flash, Africa Bambaataa, and Fela Kuti was popular, Bob Marley. You know, reggae was really, Jamaicans were coming into the picture, and it was just a very dynamic time. And Bronx was coming down, and the Lower East Side. It was just a big mix, very dynamic and exciting time. And people were, you know, incorporating different aspects of music. I mean, Madonna and Jean went out, and I met Madonna through Jean, and I was at her first performance, and it was at Peppermint Lounge.
Was
it?
Danceteria.
Danceteria.
Yeah.
Danceteria. And anyway, and it was just like a very short performance. She didn't have a band or anything.
To the dancers.
She had her dancers, which were part of her act, and she was just amazing. And it wasn't like her singing ability, it was just this whole concept that was coming together, and she was showing it for the first time.
And he was in the band too, and his band Great.
What's that?
He was also in the band, him and Michael Holman.
Yeah.
In Great.
And yeah, Jean was in a band, and you could see him, he's practicing his clarinet in one of the images, and he was in a band called Greg. It was called Test Pattern and before that.
So I was gonna say to more directly, like with the hip hop reference, a lot of people don't know this about Jean. Of course, you know this. That he actually produced a hip hop song with Ram LZ that made it on the Billboard charts. You know, so he definitely was in the hip hop. But yes. I think that like probably his influence on hip hop is bigger than what he was into at the time. He probably, from all the people, Alexis, everyone I've talked to, it seemed like he had a very diverse and kind of eclectic taste in books and music and kind of all equally influenced in different ways. So, but yeah, just a lot of people don't know that he was definitely into that. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matthew. As Stevenson said, I'm a producer and editor of the video. You said earlier during the conversation that you had also taken pictures of bands and musicians. Given the success and the notoriety of these photographs and Basquiat from Basquiat and things in Holland, do you think that you'll one day get to a point where you'll be able to or want to show people other pictures that you've shown of that time, like of the bands and musicians and things of that nature?
Yeah, definitely. They're really nice images as well. I hope to be able to.
Especially if the Bishop Gallery has anything to say. Any other questions?
I'm just curious.
And can you introduce yourself?
Overall, I'm just curious about his view of Brooklyn. He did grow up there, right?
Yes, Jean was from his neighborhood, and but his he, you know, had problems growing up with his father, and you know, he was difficult to live with, and I'm sure. And I really had a revelation when I had my own kids, and my son was about 16, how challenging it was to live with that energy, you know. But it must have been very challenging for the family, and he moved out and moved to the streets, really. And that's he started staying at Felice's, and then we moved in together. So that was really his first apartment.
Yes, well, just because this young woman in the back has not asked the question yet, and then I'll come back to you.
Hi, I'm Linda. I just had a question about this piece. It looks like George Bush is in the image of the CD. Was that planned?
We really were involved, like nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war was really present at that time. And we were very political. And it's an image of, that's George Bush Sr. He was vice president, I believe, at the time.
Oh, okay. After CIA.
Or he was head of the CIA or something like that.
And so in terms of like timing, because you were mentioning like, you know, you didn't have digital cameras and stuff like that. And so was that timed so you could capture that?
Well, it's a whole series.
Okay.
So that image happened to come out. There's other in the series that are just like test patterns, but then there's other images you can actually see what they are.
So it's kind of a coincidence that you captured.
No, I
You
was
didn't-
trying to actually.
Oh, okay. That's all right. You were like watching the TV.
But
like,
it was, you know, you couldn't pause it. There was no pause.
no Netflix. And then
I want to know, I better ask you this. In the Boom for Real film, it talks about Samo and how nobody knew who the mysterious Samo was, and then came out at the Times Square show. When did you know he was Samo?
Well, I had seen his tags on the streets, especially lower Manhattan, and was intrigued by them. And then I met him at a party and in the spring, and Felice told me, "Oh, this is Samo," and I was like, "Oh, how cool! This is Samo." I met Samo. Anyway.
Did you know Aldeas at the time, or did you
No,
kind of meet all of them later?
Yeah, I probably met Al through Jean.
Gotcha. So are there any other questions? Okay.
Hi, my name is Zara. I have two questions. Since you're a scientist, when's the beginning of life?
That's a good question. I'm prescient. The start of life. Well, when the egg and sperm come together, there's when the sperm enters the egg, it triggers a reaction, and then there's cell division, and then the embryo sort of comes together after about 3 days. Blastocyst about 5 days, but really life happens when the baby is born. You know, there's before that, it's a group of cells. You know, you can get a group of stem cells and put them in the petri dish, and they can form a little beating heart. And they're just stem cells. So it's just a group of cells that are organized and organizing and really potent and full of potential. But it's not really life till you have the baby, and there's a baby that comes into hopefully a loving, situation.
And his food to be taken care of.
But before that, it's a group of cells, really.
And your second question?
Second question is, how do you feel about the abortion law?
The abortion law. Well, I really believe that though I help people create families and babies, I think there's a lot of humans. We're not short of us. But I think it's important that if a baby comes out, that there is a loving situation for him. And that's the most important thing. Having, a baby under circumstances where there can't be love because of the circumstance, it's not fair. There's enough people and love and everything out there, but it's really about love. And so that's what I believe. And though I help make embryos and we have embryos, we freeze them, we thaw them, they're full of potential, but it's not really life until there's a love out there that's ready for it. That's my belief, anyway. And I think...
Dr. Lee?
So one thing that's striking to me is I see that wall behind you is Jean-Michel Basquiat's haircuts. And I've had the same haircut for the past 30 years. And I see just the difference in the haircuts. In that moment, do you know kind of like what correlated with his decisions to create these hairstyles?
Well, he was experimenting, and he was experimenting. That was just part of how he was expressing himself. And it's one aspect of this that we're not discussing is the racial component. Jean was trying to prove himself as an artist in a time where Black people weren't accepted in the art world. That's the fact. And he had a lot to prove, and he was. It was a lot to prove.
And you feel like his hair was part of that.
Yeah.
Wearing his hair natural, showing it to people, being proud of it.
Yes.
But
is it a time that you could say when he was...
Can you introduce yourself, sir?
Fred. And is it a time that you could say where you recognize where he was recognized as an artist, as a Black artist? Does anything stand out where you could say, I remember this, or I heard somebody say that, or...
Well, it just was like a meteor. He just took off. It was very rapid. I mean, he got the Anina in with Anina Nose, and by the end of '82, people were talking about him, and he was having his first shows. And by '83, it was just like he was out there.
I was gonna say, I think was it '84? I lived in London for a short time, and I remember '84. I think it was when the ICA did a whole show on him, and which is weird because I don't see it in the history. Like they recently did a huge show in London. They didn't mention. They kept on saying this is the first show, and I was like, no, because the ICA had a huge show on him. In '84, right?
And for those of us who don't know, the ICA is the
International Center of Art or something.
Okay.
Institute of Contemporary Art. Thank you. Do you remember that show?
I thought it was in certain
I was fascinated.
So speaking of which, just kind of transitioning this point, you get a lot of misinformation about Jean, right? And I think in addition to the pictures being beautiful and iconic, they also have historical value, right? Because the one thing you have your personal experience of being there, but you also have the proof, right? The supporting facts. What are some of the craziest things that you run into in terms of misconceptions or misinformation that's out there about Jean-Michel?
Well, that's part of why I'm doing this, is because I knew Jean, and so I can share my firsthand experiences with them. Whereas now he's become such an icon that people are getting PhDs in foreign countries based on his work. And so while they've studied him and know a lot about him, I think it's important for not only myself but other people who knew Jean to share their experiences, so that you get a better sense of what actually was happening, as opposed to like a second-hand, third-hand kind of
telephone.
Yeah, well, that you've studied this person and you're from wherever and you think you know him, but that's why it's important for us who knew him to share our experiences.
And I know you don't like putting people on blast. So if you choose to omit names, I won't
So here's
can you tell us some examples?
This is an example.
If you want to say names,
a famous
this
curator.
is a safe space.
I'm also being recorded.
Okay.
So there's a curator who had a show, and it was up on Madison. I went after the opening, and I was able to look at all the Basquiats that were there and read the descriptions. And there's one painting that Jean made of an Oreo cookie. It says Oreo. It's green background. It says Oreo. Now, in this description of this painting, it was about branding and about Warhol, but no mention of what an Oreo, as we know it, was or is, and it's a cookie. It's black on the outside, and white on the inside. So a black person. A great example is Clarence Thomas, who's the justice on the Supreme Court. I don't know what he thinks.
He's become like his own now. We'd be like, oh, you were Clarence Thomas. But
yeah,
before that, he was an Oreo.
He would be a good description of an Oreo. So anyway, in this description of the painting, there was no mention of that. I mean, this is the curator who wrote these descriptions is from Europe and had no idea, but yet could write this
And publish it.
and that becomes the narrative. So for me, it was important to reach out to this person and tell him, school him, so that he doesn't.
Why was that important for you?
Because so that here he is, an international curator who goes around the world with these paintings, and for me, it was important so that he knows for the next time he shows his painting or that it gets included in a book, that he knows what it's all about.
So since you shared that knowledge, to your knowledge, has that description changed, or did he actually utilize the information you gave him?
I don't know, but I know he's aware of it now.
Very aware.
Oh, yeah.
One more question.
Just about the Oreo. I just remember those days when, like, even the haircut, we were kids, we would just do it because it was goofing around in some weird ways. Like, the way Keith would just paint his glasses different color every day, and by the end of the month, his glasses were 5 times bigger than his face. And plus, the kid will eat the middle of an Oreo first and save the chocolate cookie outside for last, is what we were raised to hear all the time. Of course. And that's another thing that we
Of course, but, no, I would not accept that. I know what he was saying.
It's like some things you know. Things you don't know, you say you don't know. When you know, you know.
There's no reason to, put that out there.
So what are you doing now?
And it just says,
Sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, because we know you're doing, you got the tour going with your collection. This will hopefully, more exhibitions of your photography. But what are some of the things that you want to make sure people do know about Jean, and kind of the things that, from Alexis Adler, you want to make sure people kind of, let's get the record straight, let's get these things out
Well,
here.
he was just a very deep and thoughtful artist, and a just very deep person.
So it's not hype. He was really that deep.
Yes.
Any other questions before we kind of conclude for the evening? Well, thank you guys. You have been extremely faithful. And we have some more treats for you guys. Miss Adler has agreed to sign a few books for us. Okay, this is from her world tour of her collection, Basquiat Before Basquiat, East 12th Street, 1979 to 1980. It includes a lot of the artwork in her collection, but it includes an extremely large amount of the actual photos. So if you're interested in bringing some of the photos home with you, you can talk to me about purchasing one, or you can look at a book. So for a few minutes in here, Alexis will be signing some books and of course, mingling. And then, of course, our filmmakers are still here, Mary and Matt in the back. And I always gotta shout him out because he likes to hide. My business partner, Erwin John, he's in the back somewhere, but without him, we all come together and earn. He's been running with us hard for 10 years now. Without these two gentlemen, none of this stuff happened. So let's clap it up for them as well. And Vivian, you want to introduce Vivian?
So Vivian Dick is also here, who's a filmmaker from Ireland, and she is working on a project of which I'm part of, and she decided to come down to be included here.
And that's her crew in the corner filming us. Last question? No? Okay, we're good to go. Well, thank you for joining us at the Bishop Gallery and enjoy the rest of your night.
And thank you to Stevenson and Erwin.
Thank you.